What films have I been tortured with this week? Well, I watched a movie called Fist to Fist, or it's maybe called Hand to Hand. And is it a good sign when a film has multiple names and they can't seem to make their mind up? Generally no, but it depends on what you're looking for. If what you're looking for is quality, it's a bad sign. But if you're looking for something so bad it's good, then it kind of is. Fist to Fist is a low-budget American martial arts movie, and well, if you like the sort of movies that are so bad they're good, you'll probably know the holy grail tends to be The Vanity Project. And I don't mean a film like Action Jackson that had the actress Vanity in it and had actual actors. I mean something more like the film Miami Connection. Or something like Road to Revenge, also known as Get Even. Vanity films tend to be written by, directed by and starring the same person, normally a man, and the mostly men tend to write themselves as just being amazing at everything. In a vanity project, the person making it will tend to write themselves as more moral than Jesus, but also a deadly martial artist, amazing singer, and every woman in a 10-mile radius will just find them irresistible. Usually much younger and much more physically attractive women than they are. For example, in Get Even, John DeHart wrote himself in as a singer, expert martial artist, and in a relationship with a Playboy playmate. Also see the films of Steven Seagal, because in one of his films he played a world-renowned archaeologist, martial arts expert and international cat burglar. And that's pretty much what Fist to Fist is, written, starring and directed by someone called Gino Kang. He only seems to have acted in films that he himself wrote and directed, and it's arguable if he acted in any of them either. It opens up somewhere with a very flatly delivered opening monologue asking if a man can ever atone for his past sins.
Can a man ever atone for his sins? Can he make up for all the bad things he's done?
And this is the lead actor with quite a strong accent, and that's going to be his line delivery for the entire film. We then cut to outside a garage in what appears is San Francisco, and this one sequence is going to show what we can expect from the entire film, because it's not exactly what I would have expected. The acting is.
Who does it belong to?
Hugo Arsanis. He's got a few of these chop shops. SF, Oakland. They're legit body shops during the day.
There are uncomfortable, broken conversations littered throughout the film like the actors are trying to pad out the runtime, and it feels like bits of the plot are missing. It's a chop shop that breaks down stolen cars for parts, and the hero is here with a young Hispanic man that he knows from somewhere. Because the man's brother is working at the chop shop and is facing serious prison time if he gets caught. So they walk in unarmed, despite knowing that the guy running the operation has a firearm. But here's the shocking part of this film. The fights. The fights are really not that bad, and I kind of admire the guys for trying. It's kind of a throwback film in some ways, the sort of movie that would come out of Hong Kong before the Chinese government ruined it. Now, this is not the best fight choreography I've ever seen. I had a think, and that may be something like the Bruce Lee film The Way of the Dragon, or the Tony Jaa movie The Warrior King, because the staircase sequence in that film is amazing. Tony Jaa and the stunt guys do a near 5-minute fight sequence in one continuous shot. But I've been watching the series Angel recently, and for all the many good points in Angel and Buffy, the fight scenes, kind of rubbish. There's normally a cut every half a second, and frequently they get very bad matching stunt people. Like they'll just have a stunt woman standing for Sarah Michelle Gellar in the fights, who's a good foot taller than her and wearing a bad wig. But that's the downside of using actors that look like models, I guess. You may get a very good fight sequence from Gino Kang, but I'm not sure I find him quite as presentable as Eliza Dushku. So I admire Hand to Hand because the people making it clearly have a passion for martial arts, and it shows through in a film with a probably minuscule budget. They barely even have costumes for this film. Some of the fights are really quite good, but the acting is very flat.
Jimbo, how's your face? Getting better? What can I do for you? I want to do that.
And the story makes little sense when they remember to tell it at all. The hero Ken beats up a room full of bad guys and then makes the Hispanic criminal brother watch his brother's face being pushed into machinery until he changes sides.
Look at your brother!
And it would have been a bit embarrassing for Ken if he hadn't. The two Hispanic brothers then leave and are never in the movie again. The hero beats up yet another bad guy, the boss then pulls a firearm on him and walks right up to Ken for, as far as I can see, no other reason than to allow Ken to disarm him. He's even nice enough to stop pointing it at Ken so he can be disarmed more easily. Ken is supremely stupid. This is the last we see of all of these characters except Ken. We then go to the film's opening theme and credits, with a generic soft rock song, and the song's lyrics are just awful nonsense.
The path of least resistance has the most resistance for me.
What does that even mean? If the path of least resistance doesn't have the least resistance, then it isn't the path of least resistance.
The path of least resistance has the most resistance for me. Keep it out, keep it down, keep it on an even key.
And that isn't even an expression. The expression is to keep something on an even keel. It's a saying about ships. And the sound quality in this film is just brutal.
Jimbo, how's your face? Getting better? What can I do for you? I want to do that.
The microphones pick up a lot of background noise and then just cut out altogether when people stop talking. But I fear YouTube may have made me into somewhat of an audio snob. So in the story, we have Gino Kang playing the hero Ken, a reformed criminal and ex-cage fighter who now runs a community centre for runaway teens that's on the verge of shutting down due to lack of money. And trouble is coming Ken's way because a former colleague, a big white guy called Tokyo Joe, is getting out of prison. He's currently in a prison cell that looks like a utility closet that he was in for reasons the film forgets to tell the audience. He's looking for revenge on Ken for what we find out later may have been Ken turning him in for a double homicide and then marrying his girlfriend, and for some reason he's being held in prison by a single guy called Steve who's wearing a sheriff's uniform. Not a prison guard uniform. Steve is a guy from the San Francisco Sheriff's Department, who Joe gives money to, then verbally abuses, and Steve is then never in the movie again. Tokyo Joe is getting out, but he's been running a criminal gang from inside prison. Meanwhile, on the outside, he's been assembling men for the inevitable showdown with Ken. In one baffling scene, his guys are squabbling in a bar. One tries to trip a guy who looks like Shrek, only not green, and what happens next just came out of nowhere for me. You'll never guess it. Shrek just throws a dart into the back of his head.
Hey, watch this. Watch this.
Because it turns out Trip Guy has lost feeling in that part of his body in a fight, so he doesn't even notice.
You idiots drive me insane.
One of Tokyo Joe's goons hires a young street thug to attack Ken, who Ken defeats, then robs because while he was being attacked, Ken dropped his groceries and broke his eggs. He looks at the guy's driver's license and then gives him his card, so the young thug can come to the community centre for help later. Ken then goes to see a mob boss who he used to work for seemingly no reason other than to receive exposition. The guy wants him to come back and cage fight again. Ken, however, doesn't want to. Tokyo Joe then gets out and is unsure about his future, so what else would he do other than go to a pet psychic? The pet psychic tells Tokyo Joe that Ken will be his end, but Tokyo Joe's going to do it anyway. But Tokyo Joe wants to get his revenge on Ken for pretty much unstated reasons, and he's going to do this by beating Ken in a fighting tournament, again for unstated reasons. But he really wants this fighting tournament to happen, to the extent that he offers money to Ken's community centre if Ken and the kids of the community centre can beat his gang of hardened thugs in a fighting tournament. So both groups start to train in MMA. And weirdly, this part of the film surprised me a little bit, because they got quite a few famous martial arts people for the movie, including Eddie Bravo, Charles Gracie of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu family, and Judo Jean LaBelle. Ken's wife, who it seems used to go out with Tokyo Joe until he ended up in jail, goes to see Joe, and he kidnaps her with the intention of using her as leverage to make Ken and his kids throw the tournament. My best guess is that Tokyo Joe and Ken, when they were both criminals, there was an incident where they were trying to steal a car. The car contained a family, a mother, a father and a young boy, and Tokyo Joe did in both of the parents in a flashback, and later there's a reveal that the young thug who attacked and got robbed by Ken for money for eggs was the kid from the car who got orphaned. And for some reason, Joe has left utterly useless men to guard Ken's wife. They don't even bother to tie her up. Shrek then goes off to buy beer, and the other one is loudly hinting that he's going to start inappropriately touching her. So the kids go to fight in the tournament while Ken goes to rescue his wife. Tokyo Joe shows the youths from the community centre a photo of Ken's kidnapped wife to get them to throw their matches, with just the slight problem that none of them even met her in the film. The female kid has an unusual style of kicking that just seems to involve booting the other woman right in the crotch.
My groin!
And I have no idea of the timescale of any of this film. Ken then takes on 6 guys alone, and the fight is frankly not great. He kicks this one guy over who lands on another guy, and then they just both pretend to be unconscious for several seconds while he takes on the other guys. Then they just recover. Ken then defeats a bad Bruce Lee impersonator, goes to the tournament and beats Tokyo Joe, after Joe for some reason insists on switching it to being a knife fight, for absolutely no reason. It seemed like he was winning before that, and then Ken cuts Joe's throat after getting a knife embedded solidly in his chest. And that effect isn't bad. I mean, I've seen a lot worse. Ken pulls the knife out, which is a really good way of bleeding out. Ken is a complete idiot in this film. This is not a flesh wound. That knife is embedded in the region of several major arteries. I presume that Ken and his group got the $100,000 to save the community centre, but the film never mentions it again. And presumably Ken is now going to go to jail for doing in Tokyo Joe. Quite the happy ending this film's got. So how would I sum up Fist to Fist? A bit weak maybe, with some impressive martial arts scenes. Sadly, I wouldn't say it was good, and it also probably doesn't go far enough into being ridiculous to go in the so bad it's good category. It's a bit like Miami Connection, just a lot less funny. But at least Judo Jean LaBelle was in it, and when I think of Jean LaBelle, I always remember the story about him and Steven Seagal. It goes that they worked together on a film, and Seagal was boasting that chokeholds didn't work on him, so LaBelle offered to put him in one to demonstrate, which caused Seagal to pass out and mess up his underwear. Both 1 and 2, but according to an eyewitness, it supposedly didn't happen that way. Which is a shame because it's a funny story. This would have been on the set for the 1991 film Out for Justice. Seagal, you see, has a reputation of being a complete tool and intentionally injuring stunt people that work on his films, sometimes off camera. He sounds like a complete bully. According to this eyewitness, Seagal rolled up to Jean LaBelle's trailer on a movie set with 2 bodyguards because he wanted to disagree with a choke technique that LaBelle was using in the film. LaBelle offered to demonstrate the technique on Seagal, and Seagal agreed. So LaBelle supposedly slowly walked around to Seagal's back, and before he even touched him, Seagal reportedly struck the 60-year-old LaBelle hard enough in the groin with his fist that it lifted him off of the ground, at which point LaBelle supposedly threw Steven Seagal so hard that he lifted a clear 4 feet off of the ground and then landed on his butt so hard that he's still so massively oversensitive about the subject in interviews recorded decades after the supposed event. On the whole, I'm not sure ego projects are good for anyone.